Hey everyone. So I'm assuming at this point that everyone should be coming close to finishing up reading Book One of Plato's Republic. Just to give you an idea of where I think we are right now. I'm also going to, at some point today, still post an updated version of the syllabus that gets rid of the conceit of groups that we began with, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So the substance of this lecture, though, is to get into the actual philosophical meat of Plato's Republic, Book One. And I'm going to explain what I think is going on in Book One according to the following rubrics. We need to talk a little bit about how exactly to read Plato, because as I mentioned last time, he's not simply kind of writing out theses and defending them by step-by-step arguments. There are a lot of different things going on. I think it's helpful to divide Plato's way of writing into basically three levels. First, the literary level, second, the argumentative level, and third, the philosophical level. And that's really that's my own terminology. That's one way of thinking of it. Other people might refer to it in different ways, but I think it's good to divide up the text in that way. So what am I talking about exactly with respect to Book One? Well, let's think about the literary level, as I devoted one of the questions I posted on the discussion board to this. Why does the text begin with a discussion of aging, a discussion of health with Cephalus, the old man in the dialogue? Why does Cephalus leave the dialogue early on? There's actually a kind of funny moment, I think, where he's having his initial exchange with Socrates, and Socrates begins getting into what Socrates does, arguing and breaking everything apart into its component pieces. And Cephalus basically gets bored and says, I'm going to go do something else. There's maybe a kind of suggestion there that philosophy is a young person's game, something like that. I don't know. I mean, these things are always open to interpretation. That's a broader point to make about the literary level of Plato's texts. They are open to interpretation. He's not simply telling you what that means. So that level you have to treat like any work of fiction, basically, which you're probably more used to than reading philosophy texts. Anything else I wanted to say about the literary level? There is a pretty clear sense in which the different characters represent different manifestations of the virtues as traditionally understood. There is this kind of catalog of the virtues that Plato didn't invent, that was sort of just a traditional aspect of Greek thought. Cephalus probably represents moderation, sophrosune in Greek, one of the virtues. Polemarchus represents courage. His notion of justice, in fact, is kind of a warlike notion of justice. He's the one who says that justice is to be good to your enemies be good to your friends and bad to your enemies, to treat your friends well and your enemies badly. So there's a kind of suggestion of warlikeness and courage in that. Could go on about that, but I'll leave some of that literary interpreting to you, and would like to see somebody jump in on the discussion boards to maybe give their own thoughts about that level of things. The second level, so I said I call the argumentative level, and maybe you're wondering, I'll anticipate here a little bit, maybe you're wondering why distinguish between the argumentative level and what I call the philosophical level. Why aren't they the same thing? Well, basically, I think the difference is one represents what the characters themselves in the dialogue, especially Socrates, say. That's the argumentative level. The philosophical level, I think, essentially represents what Plato thinks. What exactly is the overarching message that Plato's trying to get across through the interchange between his various characters, through the often self-contradictory, difficult to understand things that Socrates says. One thing that I think is true, is a principle to observe with respect to Plato's writing, is that I think he is a good enough writer that he always knows what he's doing. It's not simply the case that, if Plato had been better at expressing himself, he would have simply told you what he wants you to think. No, I think it's important to Plato that you do some of the work of thinking yourself. It's important to him to start a conversation in which you are one of the dialogue partners, really. And at a certain meta level, there's the dialogue going on between Socrates and his interlocutors in the text itself. There's also a kind of dialogue that Plato opens up between you and him, between you and that dialogue that you're reading, between you and Socrates.